So Santa Ana, a long time ago, Orange County was made up of a lot of farms and, you know, prior, there were a lot of Japanese farmers. And there's also a history of the Chinese here too. So prior, Orange County was pretty diverse with agricultural workers and others. Once World War II hit, and then there was a lot of industrialization and less farming and more getting ready for war and things like that. Um, a lot of Asians left because they were pushed out. But prior to that, the Chinese, Chinatown was in Santa Ana. And what happened were there were white community members who wanted the Chinese out. So they said, oh, the Chinese carry TB, there's all this stuff. So they burned Chinatown down and chased the Chinese out. And the same happened during World War II, where they chased the Japanese out, Japanese farmers and others. And so Santa Ana had a strong history of having Asians, there helping to develop Santa Ana. Now today, Santa Ana is, a mixture of more of the Latinx community, more of the history of the Latinos coming in and doing same thing, agricultural work and other things. And then part of Santa Ana also has Little Saigon. And so we saw a lot of, when refugees came, they settled in Santa Ana. So a lot of Cambodians and a lot of Vietnamese. In Santa Ana, there's Mini Street, where there was a large Cambodian population because it was the only affordable area, for Orange County. So you saw this mixture of community members there, Asian and Latino.
The biggest impact was probably after the 1965 Immigration Act, when immigration barriers, a lot of them were loosened, and there was a flood of Korean immigrants that came in the 1960s and 70s and 80s and even 90s. Less now, and because of the base population in LA, that the beginnings of Koreatown in the 1970s, many Koreans settled in Los Angeles, including my family. And in Orange County, we're a secondary migration place in the 1980s. As people lived in Koreatown, they just realized, like all immigrants, you want to go to a place with a good school district and a good neighborhood. And so people were looking at communities like Cerritos, Whitney High School, Fullerton, Sunny Hills High School. Now it's more Troy High School. And people started buying houses, and that was the kind of the big wave in the 80s and 90s. And that's where our Korean history really started growing.
So I came to Southern California when I immigrated here from the Philippines, and then I actually I lived in LA for the longest time, and then I recently moved down to Santa Ana because of my current job. I moved here, I think, around the 2000, and I was around 7 years old. I actually, the funny thing is, I didn't know why we were leaving. All I remembered was my mom was just saying that we were gonna go to Disneyland. So I was like, yeah, sure. And then next thing you know, I enrolled in school, and then I started like living here. And then I didn't really know what was happening. But um, I remember not wanting to leave, but because we were traveling, I thought that was the reason why.
My family history and stuff like that is not, it's not the usual immigrant who is looking for a better life. I think my family definitely wanted for me to have a better education. I left Thailand when I was 12. It was a 12-year-old's choice to, when my parents say, hey, do you want to go study abroad? And I said, sure. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into.
I think when all of us in Vietnam migrated to United States, I think Orange County, because we have the Little Saigon area, it just feels like right at home, right? So everybody migrate. This is like the place to be. Just like when you go to Vietnam, Saigon is like in the middle of the town. It's where everybody wants to be. And I think when my dad came over, originally he was from Kentucky, so he lives in Kentucky, but he figured we would not survive in the weather. I'm glad that he didn't move us to Kentucky, but he moved here. And so ever since then, I just like the weather. I just like the atmosphere. You just feel like right at home when you first came over. You don't feel so, need to assimilate, and there's no need to learn English right away, because the people you go, most of the time you bump into somebody who can speak your language.
When we first came to the United States, and we lived out here in Santa Ana, we lived in really like in an ethnic enclave, where it was just, when I looked around, it was everybody looked like me, spoke the same language as I do, and that was what I knew of Orange County growing up, because we didn't really venture out further than the Santa Ana area. And so that's what I knew. I thought everybody were Cambodian or Cham or from Mexico, for lack of, I didn't realize that there were others out there,
Yeah.
Since 1975, obviously the Asian community has grown a lot, tremendously. I mean, there were in 75, for instance, Garden Grove was not yet a big Asian community. Westminster wasn't that big, but now if you fast forward, when I moved to Newport Beach in 1973, I was probably the only non-white in the school system. I was here without my brothers, so when I went to school, everybody was Caucasian. There was no Asian, no African American, no Latino American. It was just me, Ed. That was it.
My parent and I lived in pretty much the ghetto of Long Beach. My dad came from New Jersey, and we got sponsored, and we landed in Long Beach. So my dad came to Long Beach, and that's where we stayed. But yeah, it was a rough life in that city, because when you came from a third world country, was all Vietnamese, and you speak in Vietnamese, and all of a sudden you got thrown into this ghetto neighborhood where there's a lot of pretty much you got 10 gang within the same school. Like a mile block of the city, you have like 10 plus gang within that inner city.
In terms of what SAN does, and sort of the population, the South Asian population, like I mentioned, I think over the years I've seen it transform so much. So like growing up, I didn't see as many South Asians as I see now, and actually just 2 blocks down they opened up a Gurdwara, or a Sikh temple. So there's a lot more South Asians, like Punjabi Sikhs, who are able to, who are either living in the neighborhood or they're coming and visiting the neighborhood more often.
In Santa Ana, one of the most important places for our community is definitely the Buddhist temple on Grand Avenue. It's a place where, like, I'd say 90%, 95% even of our community members go to for different religious events or different religious ceremonies. The monks that lead the temple are very, very well trusted in the community. Oh, that's another one I should mention. Donut shops are, I don't know if they're like important, like the temple is important, but donut shops are notable because they're mostly Cambodian run, and like most of the independently run donut shops you see are probably by Cambodians.
The Western world, they want that alphabet soup behind your name. A lot of what I have between my ears are things that I have learned from aunts, uncles, my grandmother, my mother, that has no certificate. My certificate is when they nod at me and tell me that I did a good job. So even though I live in a Western world, and even though I've acquired the alphabet soup behind my name, the ones that are most important to me are the ones that come from my elders.
And so I think that what I really want the next generation to learn is not everybody's gonna have to know how to speak Mandarin or Chinese or whatever, you know, second language it may be. You need to learn more about the cultural language. The cultural language in terms of their actions really are really conveying how they really feel from what they say with their eyes, what they say with their body language. You need to be able to read that. And like I said, what I do here, we wouldn't exist if there wasn't that need.
My hope is that we continue to learn about different culture, different ways of, care about our community. For me, if I did not do this work around the Asian American community, I would not see the gaps, the need. As from there, like I got engaged civically, I got engaged in areas that I know that can make a difference. So I hope future generation, break away from your peers and take that risk and knowing what's going on in our community and start advocating, because we all need to be a part of this journey together.